Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 32 of the New Slang podcast. I'm Thomas Mooney, your editor-in-chief of New Slang here in Lubbock and podcast host, I guess. On episode number 32, we meet with Gordy, Quist, and Jurdi of the Band of Heathens. We were really fortunate to get them on to the podcast this past week. It was kind of a not necessarily last minute kind of deal, but it was one of these things where, you know, they're playing at the Cactus Theater here in Lubbock, and we just weren't really sure if we were going to be able to fit it in to their afternoon schedule. Thankfully, though, we were able to get a short little interview done. It's about 20 minutes. You know, they just released their fifth studio record now. I know they have like three live records in there as well, but their fifth studio record, Duende, came out in January, like mid-January. And, you know, I've been playing that record for, I guess, since then. I think it's one of the best records so far in this early year. And, you know, it'll probably be up there near the top come end of 2017 as well. I went ahead and bought it on vinyl. And, you know, I think like the record was already it had a lot of these worn textures and tones to it. And on vinyl, I know I'm going to sound like one of those guys who says, you know, vinyl's better than MP3 and CD and 8-track and whatnot. But, you know, the warmth of the record comes out so much better on vinyl. So I encourage you to go ahead and buy that record if you don't already have it. We'll throw a link into the description here. Anyways. All right. So I say this like every week. If you don't follow New Slang on all the social media, go ahead and do so. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram and on Twitter, you can just search for _New Slang. On Facebook, you can just search New Slang, 2 words, and we should pop up near the top. If you haven't reviewed or rated the New Slang podcast on iTunes, go ahead and do so. It really does help. It's the whole analytical aspect of iTunes. It pushes us further to the top, which is always a good thing. So if you haven't done so, go ahead and do all that. We'll go ahead and get on to the conversation with Band of Heathens. Hey, you guys just put out a new record. To me, like that new record, it has a whole lot of these like Beatles vibes. Is that like something that you guys were going for, like in a way? Like it has a lot of those, like that late 60s, early 70s, just those rich tones, kind of like in a Beatles country way.
You know, I'm a huge Beatles fan. That's kind of what I grew up on. My parents were really into the Beatles, and I think that
you can just jump in.
Yeah. Hey, Ed. Yeah, you know, the Beatles obviously a huge influence on pretty much all music going on. Mm-hmm. But you know, we love the Beatles. I think the textures and the tones you're talking about. We recorded a lot of the record at this studio with pretty much a lot of the same preamps and compressors, like the Fairchild compressor that they had at Abbey Road. A lot of very similar gear we were using, so that might be where some of the similar tones come in.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just like, you know, some of the chord changes and harmonies we love we're definitely influenced by all sorts of music, and the Beatles definitely a heavy influence.
Yeah, I think like the last record is a lot warmer than I think anything you guys have done before. It just feels really warm overall. And also like there's a little, I can't remember what song it was, but it kind of reminded me of like the Zombies or something. A lot of the harmony that you guys are talking, because obviously you guys been doing the harmonies for a long time, but like those, I don't know, like on this record I felt like it's just a little bit warmer, a little bit richer.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of that comes from tubes You know, the gear we used, it was almost all tube preamps. And then when it was mixed, everything was pretty much run through more tube preamps and tube compressors. And so I think that's where you kind of get some of that, the fat, warm sounds that I love that make a record sound really rich.
Yeah.
You know, I've done some records on tape, even on 2-inch tape, and I feel like the tubes can almost warm up the record more than going to tape. You know, you can do a record digitally if you're using a bunch of tube pre's and tube compressors on the front end and, you know, tube microphones. So, I don't know. Yeah, there's probably, I don't know how many tubes were used in the making of the record, but it was a lot.
Pound for pound, more tubes on this record than any record we've made before.
Yeah.
Pound for pound, we'll put our record up against any record with the amount of tubes that were used in the record. Tubes, everything was tubed.
Yeah. Is that something like you guys are thinking about when you're writing the song? Like when you're writing a song and at the very beginning of the process, are you guys thinking about what you're going to do to it later, or are you just writing the song?
Sometimes. It just depends on the kind of song, you know. I mean, the thing about songwriting is there's so many songs that die, that never really like ever leave your room. And in a weird way, some of those have been my favorite, but I don't know if you know what I mean. But just in terms of like being a good thing, being a therapeutic thing, or being a thing that was a good, you know, just a good exercise to get to wherever I needed to get to next. But some of the songs, as you're writing them, you kind of can start to hear things in your head, and then some songs, you know, some songs live perfectly on just a guitar and a voice, or a piano and a voice, or something like that. You know.
Yeah.
You know, there's one song on the record called "Daddy Longlegs" that was written before we went into the studio. But I will say some of the tones that our engineer, Jim Valentine, that he was pulling up as we were making it, I would say that those tones definitely shaped the way the band played, and the parts that we came up were heavily influenced by the sounds that were coming out. It was like, oh, wow, this fuzzy, you know, this fuzz part is really cool, and then that would inspire the part.
Yeah.
Ed's vocal performance on that track, you know, he just cranked the pre and made it really distort and kind of made it fuzzy, and I think that changed the way he sang it. And so those sounds, you know, they're not always in your head when you're writing the songs, but I think they do shape the parts that we play in the moment, because that's what you're hearing back.
And also, does it have an effect just because like you guys have been in the same band with one another for a long time, so like you guys are able to maybe have the idea of like what the band sounds like? You understand what I'm saying? Like writing more towards like the sound of the band versus like I don't know, like what you think this song should.
Yeah, I think some of that, but I also think that whatever we bring in material-wise kind of becomes that anyway. So I think what we've been trying to do the last couple records we made is sort of not pre-plan that too much. You know, most of the time when we're in the studio, the most anyone's heard would be like a rough demo, an acoustic demo, if they've even heard that. A lot of times the first time anyone's hearing the song is when we set up in the morning, we're like, hey, we're going to track this song, check it out. So it's sort of, I think with recording, you want to try to get a lot of your first instincts, especially with our band. Everyone's very familiar with each other. So I think that's sort of adding a little bit of element of surprise is where a lot of the cool stuff comes. But we still have the foundation of having played together for so long that it's not, you know, so all over the place that we can't sort of get a pulse on it and rein it in.
Does it keep each other on your toes in a way, right? Keep it fresh, interesting.
Totally.
Yeah.
You got to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, how many records are you guys in now? Like 6, 7?
This is our
7,
fifth
like
studio, and then if you include the live records, that's maybe 8.
Yeah. The double one that you guys did, where it was like with the DVD and everything, like how much work went into actually doing all of that? Because it feels like, you know, it's one thing to cut a live record, but then it's entirely different thing to do a live DVD on top of it.
It's as much as doing, I mean, besides the fact that it wasn't new material per se, everything about that entailed just as much work as making the studio record. Now, that record's totally live. You know, it's not like we went back and did overdubs and stuff on it, but just like going back through listening to everything. So we recorded 2 3-hour shows. So it was like 6 hours of music. Going back through that, culling the performances, and then like you said, the DVD thing was the whole. I mean, I guess when me and Gordy sort of set out to do this, it just started. The project got bigger and bigger, and then, it's like, so you get through the audio stuff. Okay, that's cool. Now with the performances we have, we've got to look at the video that we have, make sure we're getting the right shots you want in the video.
Make sure we don't look like idiots.
Yeah, well, which is tough to do, So
is that
yeah, man, it was a lot of work, and it's like making it's like just like making a record,
Yeah.
It was also like our manager helped a ton because not only did we do those 2 nights at Cervantes in Denver, but we made a whole weekend of it. We called it the Double Down.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of for all the people who bought the travel packages and flew in, we did these private acoustic shows. We had a poker tournament. We did we had a contest where the fans got to vote on a cover set, like pick a band that will cover a bunch of songs and do a set of their music. And we did a Grateful Dead set. We had a fan write one of our set lists of our original material one of the nights. Like, so there were actually like not just us worrying about, what songs we're going to play in the performances, but it was like a whole weekend of events, and it was really fun. But yeah, it was probably, in hindsight, had we known how much work it was going to be, I don't know that we would have done it, but it was really fun. It turned out really great.
Yeah. See, that's one of my favorite questions is if you're going to do an album all the way through of someone else's material, maybe it's going to be Grateful Dead. Like what record is there, like if you guys were doing like a show like tonight at the Cactus in that kind of setting, that if you just were going to play through like an entire record of someone else's?
We just covered Harvest by Neil Young around New Year's time. But actually in the Cactus, that would actually be a good record to do, and it's funny because whenever we talk about this, a lot of the records that everyone loves, we don't realize how much of the records are down tempo. And, playing a live show is different than making a record. It's sort of, there's got to be a different pacing and a flow to the show, which a lot of times an album in your house or with a handful of people listening to it makes for a really good listening environment. But you get a lot of people in a room and there's a certain energy and a buzz in a room. It's like, 3 or 4 ballads in a row or a solo piano number and a solo acoustic number next to each other. It's sort of like, it's, you know what I mean? It's tough. So it's interesting because there aren't a ton of records that make a lot of sense front to back that work like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I always kind of categorize records as like Saturday night records or Sunday morning records, and it very much is that where, you throw on a record on Sunday morning and it just works a whole lot better because it's a lot more mellow, but then you try playing that on a Saturday night straight through. Of course, like you guys also, like you're doing like a lot more theater shows like this now where, the crowd's paying attention a little bit more. Is that something like when you guys first started doing that more, a little weird, just like people actually listening and
our first taste of doing shows like that was going to Europe, because in Europe it seems like the audience is much more attentive and listening to lyrics, and after the show they come up and ask you about lines, and English isn't even their first language half the time, and maybe that's the reason why they're listening so intently. So I don't know. It's nice. It's awesome when a fun rock and roll show when the crowd's really jamming and partying. And those are really fun too. There's kind of two different things. And then a seated theater show is really nice. You kind of get to kind of give it more of you can get away with the Sunday morning vibe.
Yeah.
A little bit more, which is a nice change up.
Yeah. I mean, like here in Texas, I think like you have a good dose of both. Obviously, there's a lot more bar venues here, but some of my favorite shows that I've seen have been the ones where you're just sitting down. I wish like there was more places like that here in Lubbock. I mean, like, we have like the Cactus, and there's like really the only other place is Citibank, which is pretty much bigger, and then there's the United Spirit Arena, where Tech basketball games and shit. So there's not a whole lot of room to just move up a bigger spot.
It's like I think in the traditional sense of the music, like a lot of the country stuff was ballroom and barroom based. Like sort of almost substituting for the jukebox. You know what I mean? It's like songs had to be played that people could dance to and people could drink to.
Yeah.
So we certainly at different points in our career fulfilled that, but I also feel like just the design of the band has also always sort of been set up to end up in more into theater setting where you can get loud and play harder and faster, but also like, you're in a listening space where you can pull back and do those things. That, that's definitely something we enjoy doing, kind of having both elements of that in the show,
Yeah. They obviously like Big O Cotton Clubs used to be the big thing with, Western swing bands going through with, I don't even know how many people, 7, 8, 9 people in a band. And I was reading an article about how, I guess mid-'70s when the outlaw country thing started really going through Texas, there'd be these big O stages with, like Waylon Jennings, just like a 4-piece, and they'd just be all spread out, and just taking up the entire room because it's something they had never been used to doing, and like how gradually they just were like, fuck it, we're going to just kind of be close together because we don't know anything else than...
Yeah, I mean, the music is that music, and like even what we do in a different extent, it's reliant on being able to hear what everyone's doing. We're not up there just playing the same stuff every night.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same instance, like it really, our show sort of requires the audience to participate, and not in a way where it's like, come on everybody, let's all do the same thing at the same time, but in a way where it's like, like there's dynamic shifts, there's changes in the show which sort of, benefit from the audience reacting to those things.
Yeah. So you guys aren't really into the everybody start clapping on the song, like every song.
Not so much.
Side story, I saw Justin Townes Earl at Cactus one time. It was probably like 3 or 4 years back. And it was full band, and the band goes off to the side and he's playing an acoustic song, and somebody starts trying to do that, start up a clap, and he says, like in between verse and chorus is like, hey, if you guys don't mind, would you just stop doing that? And then they keep on doing it, laughing it off, and he's like, no, I'm serious. And then like continues to play, and then after the song ends, he's like, yeah, I'm not really into that kind of shit. Because really, if I wanted there to be clapping on the song, I would have hired you guys. And like people were just like, oh my God, like, which I was just like, yes,
yeah,
finally someone tells them to stop doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. He's pretty fantastic too.
Just brutally honest.
Yeah. Sometimes it's got to be like that.
Yeah. Have you guys had any?
I don't mind people clapping as long as they clap on the 2 and 4.
There you go.
Yeah.
Not on the 1 and 3.
None of that waltz.
Yeah. I remember I guess I was like in junior high, in football. We would do this clap up before the games. Started out real slow, gradually get faster. And there's this one kid who was just like always throwing us off. So our coach was just like, just do this right here. Just no, don't touch the hands. Just go like
yeah, air clapping.
Yeah, it wasn't me, even though I have like really bad rhythm too. So, but something interesting I think is that you guys really popularized that Levon Helm song Hurricane, and there's like a lot of bands doing that now, like, and they're doing like y'all's version of it. Have you guys noticed that? Like
I've heard it on the radio once or twice.
Yeah.
Of other bands. I'm actually not even sure who they are, but I've heard other bands doing it and doing the arrangement.
Yeah.
That we did.
Is that kind of strange? Like pushing a movement in
it's
a way?
Cool. It's a great song. And I think in the early 80s it had, people knew that song a little bit better, and then it kind of faded away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool to kind of bring it back.
Yeah. Now you guys are down in Austin, and Austin's always like, I guess these last, I don't know, even you could probably go back 30, 40 years, but Austin's changed probably more in the last 10, 15 years than has in any other decade, really, right? A lot of gentrification, a lot of, even though still being called the live music capital of the world, I know there's a lot of people who are, I guess, challenging that notion now. Like, what do you guys think about that? Like, what's the...
I don't know. The city is changing a lot. The culture of the city is changing a lot. It's getting more expensive. which makes it harder for artists to be able to live within the city. So a lot of people are moving to the outskirts of town or to other cities. And so that's definitely changing the vibe. We're on the road so much. I mean, I'm not as involved in the scene as I used to be because we travel so much. And, I have kids. And so, like, when I'm home, I'm kind of a homebody. But I still go out and see shows, and there's still a ton of live music, and there's stuff to do every night of the week. But it's just, I don't know, it maybe less of a tight-knit community than it used to be. And I think everyone's just working harder and struggling, just because it's so expensive, and you got to really hustle to be able to afford to live there, or you just move out to Dripping Springs or to Buda, or you move to the outskirts.
We're doing
of
that
town.
after. We're gonna do that after. No, but yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends are always saying, like, why don't you move down to Austin and do this there? And I'm just like, it's a lot cheaper in Lubbock, is why.
Yeah, well, you don't really need to be there. I think, and to echo Gordy's point, I think there's still a ton of music there. I think maybe the scene has become a little more diffuse, The whole, I think when people think of Austin, there's a certain connotation of the style of music and the vibe that came out of there, whether it be the outlaw country thing you're talking about, or the really strong singer-songwriter thing that people identify with Texas and specifically Austin. But there's a more diverse music scene, and I think just the vibe in which people have to hustle is different. Like, to echo the point of it becoming more expensive, it was like Austin used to be the kind of town where you show up, hang out, smoke a J, meet some people, write some songs, play a couple shows, hang out, whatever. And now it's a bigger city. Like, when people come, they have to kind of have to hit the ground running. You don't have a lot of time to sort of just fuck around, which is kind of in a lot of ways is what you need to be able to make great music and great art. You need time and you need the space to make mistakes and to sort of mess around with it.
I mean, you used to be able, when we first moved to town, I feel like you could play, 3 or 4 nights a week in town in different projects, and maybe on the weekend go out and tour, around Texas, and you could pay your bills doing that.
Yeah.
And now I just think that you got to have a day job. I think it's just harder to be able to afford if you're going to live within the city. And there still is, the writing and the lots of joints, but it's kind of becoming a software town, in some ways. Like, the software culture is definitely a big part of the city's identity now. And, I try not to be bitter about it. I wish music would remain a big part of that, and I'm hopeful that it will. The city's actually trying to do a lot to keep venues open and keep supporting the arts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different. But it's always, the people in the 90s were complaining that it wasn't what it was like in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's always changing. And I think every city's always evolving and changing. So.
Yeah. I mean, I can see there being problems and everything like that, but also at the end of the day, it's probably one of the most progressive cities when it comes to the arts in the nation, So, it's still probably better off than a whole lot of other, just towns in Texas.
There's no place I'd rather live. I love living there, even though it's different. It's still a cool city, and hopefully I can afford to stay.
Yeah. Yeah.